Welcome, everyone, to the third Thursday meetup of the West Orlando WordPress Meetup Group. I'm Rob Watson, a co-organizer and host. West Orlando WordPress is an official WordPress meetup group affiliated with the WordPress Orlando and WordCamp US meetup groups. Tonight's speaker, Scott Mann, comes from a long line of business owners who drove their businesses into the ground by being too nice. He spent 5 years not charging enough and 10 years doing favors that were never returned. He's here to share some of his hard-knock tips and tactics on staying nice, but earning what you deserve and leveling up your WordPress services. Scott is an Emmy-winning creative director and has 25 years of experience leading teams to produce exceptional online presence for organizations worldwide. He founded Highforge, a WordPress-centric marketing collective. He's helped small startups, as well as enterprise corporations, lead and succeed online. He and his teams have managed over $100 million in project and ad spending and over $900 million in revenue growth for companies across dozens of industries. He loves to solve problems, make clients happy, and help creatives achieve their destinies. He's been a certified Google partner since 2002, and he's passionate about building lead-generating online marketing campaigns for service-based businesses. As an international speaker and coach for freelancers and agency owners, he's helped many level up their game. He's a fan of nonprofits with creative missions and has served on numerous boards of directors in Central Florida. He digs racquetball, live music, adventure travel, scuba, and a nonprofit called Be the Match that helps save lives. At this point, I'd like to invite everyone to mute their microphones for the presentation. Scott, thank you for being our presenter this evening. The time is now yours.
Thank you very much, Rob. I appreciate that warm intro. And to be clear, everybody, I made a lot of other people that money, so I don't have $900 million in the bank, but we're doing okay. I am very excited to present here. One of my favorite things in the world to do is to help other people who were in my place get to a much higher level without doing what I did, which was, as I'm climbing the ladder, I kept falling down and hitting my head on every rung on the way down. So some of you may actually identify with that. So hopefully we can climb this ladder better together and hit a lot less rungs as we do it. So I'm going to jump right in. Basic information is going to be here, but this will also be on the last slide at the end as well. So don't worry about that too much at this moment. And we're going to jump right into it. So let's see. It's a fun little game between screen sharing and presenting. So, all right. So we're going to start traveling down the road of the dangers of giving it away, and talking about how people pleasers like myself and maybe some or all of you in the room have run into some problems as we travel down this road of entrepreneurship, ideally to greener pastures in the future. So we'll start off with a little bit of family history here. Before diving too deep, we'll start off with the fact that I have a lot of entrepreneurship in my DNA. And going back into the history of our family, my oldest ancestor ran a smithy in the Scottish Highlands. And while most of his contemporaries were worrying about clan wars and sheep and the occasional rogue bagpiper, probably, my great, I don't know, whatever grandfather, he was trying to figure out the best way to market horseshoes. And you've probably heard of family secrets. Well, our family secret was a smithy in the Scottish Highlands. Nobody knew it existed. And it's not because it was hidden or anything. It was just because business was probably that slow. So it's probably safe to say that marketing wasn't his strong suit, neither was business in general, to be honest. And, you know, hey, at least our family has a consistent track record. He wasn't alone. We can go back to my dad's business, my grandfather's business, my mom's business. We've all struggled. and I feel like I finally cracked the code, and now I've spent a lot of my career coaching other freelancers and small business owners, and that's unpaid coaching primarily, to help them level up their businesses and win at what they're doing. And so that's really what we want to do here today. So we're gonna jump into that and talk about all the things that we do that get us into trouble, and we're going to talk about actionable things that we can do today as well to make more money and to level up. So let's begin with something that's appropriate for this time of year, which is being in the giving spirit. Uh, I'm sure a lot of us love to give, and many of us probably give a lot to charity and all of that too. But also, as freelancers and small business owners, agency owners, people working in this space, maybe even some of you might be employees in a business, but maybe you work extra hours. All of these things are essentially ways that you're giving, whether you're giving to your boss, your business, your community, etc. And we're specifically going to focus today on what it looks like when you're giving to clients. What does that look like? There are a lot of people, as businesses grow up, they get to a point where there is no room for give. But typically freelancers and small business and small agency owners, it's very easy to say yes to things. And oftentimes it's very easy to say yes to things that don't actually put more money in your pocket. And so what I would recommend to every single person in this room is to make it a point for the rest of your career to be very, very intentional about giving. And an example of this is, if somebody calls you on the phone and asks for you to donate to their charity, you're probably less motivated to do it than perhaps you had a family member who is struggling with cancer, for example, and somebody calls you and they're like, hey, we're doing support and research for this very specific kind of cancer. Would you be interested in giving? You might feel a lot more passionate about giving to that second charity. Well, I would say the same thing about your business. Be very intentional. If a client is asking you to give, that should be less of a trigger than if you decide that a client needs some additional help and you want to give and you want to make it a part of your business strategy to give. And I would also say this, when people ask for free work or ask for work that maybe they're trading for exposure or whatever, you may have heard this before. We'll talk a little bit about things that maybe bad clients or bad prospects might say to you. And these should be red flags, and they should make you either run for the hills or decide, hey, if they're going to ask this, I'm going to find a way to make it actually worth it to do this work. But here are the triggers that you want to watch out for. Can you do it for cheap or free because we're all about to get funding or national exposure? You'll get all of our future work. A lot of times people will ask for cheap upfront work or discounts before you start doing other work. And the answer to this should be a very carefully crafted hard pass, more red flags. We're a popular nonprofit, and we'll tell people you did the right thing. You can write it off. If there are any CPAs in the room or any people familiar with the tax code, you'll know that you cannot write off labor as a tax write-off. So in our cases, we're all providing services, and you can't write that off. And more importantly, I don't know about you guys, but I did tons of work for nonprofits and large companies for a long time. A lot of it was give. And no matter how many people they told about me or how much exposure I got, that never led to other business. It was really from other ways. So another red flag: help us, be a hero, save us now, we'll pay you later. We'll give you lots of work. Do it free now and we'll pay you later. Never, under any circumstances, should you be playing this game. Another one: do it for me cheap. I'll refer you to some big companies. Yeah, no, that usually is not how that plays out as well either. Stay away. And then I can't afford you, but I'll pay this lower amount of money. And I promise I won't be a pain in the neck client, and I'll be easy to work with, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if any of you have taken business like this, but in the beginning of my career, I can assure you that every single person that ever said that was the biggest and most difficult client I've ever had to deal with, on repeat over and over again. They were all the same. So these are great red flags to avoid and stay away from. And let's get out of the weeds and back onto the main road. And let's talk about the next big subject, which is discounting. Discounting is a very common way that most freelancers and small agency owners, it's an easy tool to pull out to close a deal really fast if somebody's on the fence or if they're looking at some of your competitors. You give them a price and they're on the fence, and um, you can come back and give them a discount here or there, or you can even use discounts as a way to promote your service. But I am here to tell you that discounting is the equivalent of death by 1,000 paper cuts. If you add up the total of all the discounts you've ever given, that's probably the amount of money you should have made for all the work you were doing. So keep that in mind, that your price is your price, and that price should be uh, a vote towards integrity as well. As soon as you give somebody a discount, you are cutting down on your integrity. So when you sell on your price, you're taking the focus away from the value you're providing. So instead of giving them a discount, instead give them reasons why you're worth all of that and more. Any reduction in those prices damages your integrity. And then getting those types of customers to refocus on your value can be very difficult, because they're always trying to focus on how do I get the next discount. And our culture has a how do I get the best deal culture built into it. So you're going to have to fight against that. And then this is really important. And this is the part that I want you to think about. If you're a people pleaser, it's really easy to give a discount to close a deal, or to help a client out that you really like. But the reality is they've done a lot of studies on this, and providing any discount at all will actually make your brand look weaker, and there will be an expectation of more poor performance for whoever provides the discounting. So keep that in mind and take that to heart, and don't discount. Moving further down the road, here's some really helpful tactics to stay nice. And this is kind of the key, especially for a lot of the people pleaser personalities and beginning entrepreneurs. Like, how do you kind of toe that line? So in the beginning, it was really difficult to track, all the billable hours that were going on. And sometimes a client would end up getting a little extra work out of their scope. Most of us in the room are familiar with what scope creep is and how it kind of comes to be. And many of us have probably been on the losing end of scope creep. And the way that in the beginning, I was able to help our agency avoid scope creep is the first time there was an overrun of any kind, we would typically do an hour or two worth of work to show good faith to the client before we gave them the, hey, we're not going to bill you for those 1 or 2 hours that we went over this time, but in the future, for anything additional out of scope, we're going to track and bill for time. And a good way to kind of manage this for the future is to get their permission at this stage to say, hey, for anything less than a couple of hours, is it okay for us to just track and bill for time? If it's going to be more than 5 or more than 10 or whatever fair or reasonable amount is based on the size of your project, you can say, hey, if it's going to go over 5 or 10 hours, we will reach out and get your permission in advance, and we'll get sign off from you before we proceed. So those are a couple of ways that you can kind of manage scope creep in a very nice but firm manner that makes you look like the good guy, but also makes it clear that that you're going to get paid for doing a reasonable amount of work. So, and then while we were talking about discounts, we'll bring that back around. If you have to, if you must, which I still recommend that you don't, but if you must, tie it to a very, very good reason. If somebody is going to get a discount, it can't be for no reason at all. It can't be like, oh, just because the competitor was at a lower price. That it can never be that. It always needs to be, okay, we're going to be doing it this time because we're doing a specific amount of volume. You're going to prepay 100% of the project in advance. You're going to bundle it with other work, whatever the case may be. So keep that in mind if you must. And then here's another very significant danger on the road to entrepreneurial success. And this one is something that a lot of us have struggled with, I suspect. And anybody who's doing any kind of volume at all in the freelance world, you're going to find very, very quickly that there are going to be a certain percentage of your clients that are going to be consistently late paying their bills. And it is really, really critical to pay close attention to this and nip that kind of behavior in the bud as quickly as possible. Because if you let them get away with it once, they will get away with it every time, and they will continue to push the boundaries of how late they can pay without getting into trouble. And if you're not careful and you're not paying attention, and especially if you're really busy with multiple clients, you'll sit down and look at your books one day, 6 months down the road, and realize that there are 10 or 15 clients that are 3 and 4 months behind on their payments. And if you add it all up, you are a shocking amount of money behind. And more importantly, you're essentially doing this work for free and giving those clients short and long-term loans with no terms whatsoever. You're basically leveraging your income to help their businesses with nothing to show for it. And there's always the danger that once they get far enough late, that maybe they won't pay it at all. So this is why it's so critical to pay such close attention to any client that pays late, even if it's 1 or 2 days. And so let's talk about some tips and tactics in relation to late payments and what to watch out for and what to do about it. So I highly recommend that everybody who's doing project-based work to make sure that you're taking at least 50% of the project up front. If it's a small project, you should be taking 100% up front. These are common and expected terms for pretty much any business owner. They should be expecting that. And anybody who pushes back on that is probably a red flag. So keep that in mind. So 50% up front. And if your prices are correct and you're charging properly, the 50% up front should cover all of your expenses, all of your costs. Also, whatever the costs are, if you're hiring or getting help on the project from other people, it should cover the expenses and costs of that. And then if you're doing it, like I said, a small project, 100% upfront. And then if it's a monthly recurring revenue, I recommend that you bill in advance instead of in arrears. Most freelancers and small business owners make the mistake of billing after the month of work that you've done, and that puts you in a position of risk, pretty serious risk if you're doing a lot of work in any given month. So when we do any billing for any ongoing services, we're billing at least 30 days in advance for the month that we're about to begin work on. The same holds true if you're on the marketing side, for media buy. If you're helping your clients by running social ads or Google ads or things like that, you should be billing for all of that in advance. So Net terms can also be kind of scary. I've noticed that over the years that I just build net terms pretty clearly into my contracts so that there's no surprises. But your net terms should never be more, in my recommendation, you should try not to make them ever more than 10 days. The longest they should ever be is 30 days. A net term just basically means from the time of your invoice, how long they have to pay the bill before it's overdue. So 10 days is a reasonable turnaround time for most work. And obviously that would not apply. This is another red flag. I do not recommend anybody begin work, even if you send an invoice net terms 10 to start a project. You shouldn't begin work on the project until that initial down payment is made, unless it's already a long-term client that you know pays on time and is very good and diligent. For new clients, no work should ever be done until you have a check in your hand. No exceptions to that rule. For bigger clients, if you're doing business with somebody who has, a slightly bigger organization, typically they're going to have an accounts receivable or accounts payable person or a controller who's managing payments rather than the business owner. Once they get to that size, sometimes you'll notice that when you send out your invoices that you get paid late, but you always get paid late consistently about the same amount of time. Generally, that means you're just falling in the cracks between their payment cycles. And so if you can get a hold of that controller or CPA or billing manager and just ask them what the best date of the month to invoice them on is so that they can process your payments in a timely manner, then that can make a really big difference in getting paid on time. And if that fails, one of the best tricks we've ever discovered for getting paid on time is changing the net terms. And so what we did was, for example, for some clients, it takes them sometimes like 4 to 6 weeks to send checks out once they get an invoice. What we started doing is we started billing them 6 weeks in advance with net terms for 6 weeks, so that the deadline was 6 weeks away. And once we started billing them earlier with longer net terms, we started getting paid on time. It's an illusion, but it works really well. This is a rare situation, but if you get clients that their business is in trouble and it looks like they're so late that they might never pay, only in this scenario could you potentially offer a discount. Say, hey, if you pay us faster, we'll give you like a 2% discount on your payment. Or you could, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you're either giving them a discount to pay you faster, or if you're in my shoes, you're working towards wrapping up the relationship and oftentimes letting them know that for us to continue, things are going to need to get paid on time. And, if this happens, again, we'll have another conversation, but then I may work towards finding somebody to refer you to for future business, because it puts, and this is important, when you're talking to clients about these things, you're not trying to hold them accountable in a negative way. You're trying to give them a story for what the actual impact is on you. Hey, because this payment is late, I wasn't able to pay my vendor in time, or hey, because this wasn't paid in a timely manner, I had to take another project, which is going to cause delays on your project. Again, the mission here is to tell them a story so they understand the repercussions and the ramifications of making late payments to you and how it affects your ability to provide services to them. And once you tell the story, oftentimes you'll find that there's a lot of empathy on their side and behavior typically changes. So then this is another thing, just something to keep in mind from a macro level. I know it's tough to let clients go, especially if they're paying your bills. But your mission should be to always be on the lookout for another client to replace late paying clients. I had a late paying client early in my career that, they're on average, they were paying 2-3 months late 100% of the time. It's very, very difficult and stressful to deal with. And when I got a new client that paid about the same amount of them as them in monthly recurring revenue, as opposed to thinking I got a raise, I used that as an excuse to go back to that first client, and with a lot of confidence and authority and not worrying about whether or not I can pay my bills anymore, I was able to have the conversation with them and give them essentially the choice. Either you pay on time going forward, or we're going to have to move on to work with clients that will pay us on time. And uh, having confidence and being willing to let them go if they can't change their behavior was a game changer. And it really changed the way that we did business dramatically, and it reduced stress for everybody involved. And in some cases, the clients changed their behavior permanently and it was never an issue again. And in other cases, the client didn't change and we just very peacefully and patiently rolled them off as a client. So I don't need to get into the details of that now, but if anybody wants to dig in on how to let clients go gracefully, we can talk about that because we've got some good tactics for that too. So, and then the last thing, and this is maybe the thing that was most impactful for my agency when we started to get more clients than it was easy to follow. My billing team was having a hard time keeping up with everything at one point in our growth. And we found that implementing some software solutions had a pretty dramatic impact on late payments. One that really jumps out to me is software that layers onto QuickBooks called Invoice Sherpa. But both QuickBooks, FreshBooks, Xero, and a lot of these other accounting software systems now have automatic and automated reminder systems built into them for when a payment is overdue. But what was really interesting about Invoice Sherpa was that it tracked and it consistently tracks in real time all of your clients, how late they all are all at once, and it can even track their late payment history all in one really cool place. But oddly enough, it's the warnings that Invoice Sherpa sent that really got clients to pay their late invoices. And it was really just some sort of UI, UX trigger. But the QuickBooks reminders don't scare people. But for some reason, the Invoice Sherpa reminders got people's attention and got them to pay. So, if people are consistently paying late, investigate changing your design of the email reminders that go out, and also consider onboarding. Like Invoice Sherpa allows me to automate sending out text reminders and even voice reminders, phone calls that are all automated that go out to clients when they're late. So you can get aggressive if you really want to with automations before you need to get involved personally with the client. Moving further down the road, let's talk about unspoken favors. So this is really a common problem with people pleaser mentalities as well. When I first started doing this, I was always thinking to myself, this is so much fun, and I love helping people so much. It almost doesn't feel like work sometimes. And so I would always end up going this extra mile and doing all this extra work and doing all these amazing extra things for the client. And, by the time I'm done with the project, like I've already forgotten about all those amazing, awesome things I did extra for them that they probably wouldn't know about, wouldn't notice. And it just goes completely under the bridge. So I want to remind all of you freelancers, all of us small business agency owners, all of us working in this space, and also employees working for your own bosses. When you go the extra mile, it's not the responsibility of your client, and it's not the responsibility of your employer or the people you're working with to notice it. So it's on you to bring your attention to it. And I know it's not easy to talk about yourself, but hopefully it's easier to talk about the work you're doing. So don't ever skip a moment to talk about something you did where you went the extra mile. And you know, you don't have to constantly beat somebody up about it, but don't ever forget to talk about it and be excited about it. People will share on your passion for when you do go that extra mile. And all right, going further down the road, we're getting towards the finish line here. So let's talk about one of the ways that we're giving away our business up front. And this is probably one of the ways that got me into the most trouble in our very early phases, which was the most common way that we ended up doing projects with clients was getting on the phone with them, interviewing them, asking them all the really important questions to make sure that we were going to scope this properly, that we were approaching this with the right strategy for their clients, their target market, their messaging, their branding. Like, I mean, we were really, really going deep to make sure that we were going to do all of this right so that we could put together the perfect proposal for them. Well, interesting how this plays out. Doing that kind of work is actually the hardest part of the project. And what we found, surprisingly, was that as we did all of that work, we helped the clients develop their strategy and their planning, and they figured out exactly what they needed and how they needed it done as a part of that process. And then they would get the proposal and they'd be like, that's interesting, but this gives us the entire roadmap for how we can do all of this. So we're going to ask the owner's son, who also does some of this work on the side, to see if he can just take this proposal and bring it to life. And you'll lose a ton of business this way by putting all of your eggs up front in a nice, pretty bow on a basket. Whether you realize it or not, your biggest skill is in your experience, and your the biggest thing that you're bringing to the table is your knowledge of what your project needs to be and what's going to be best for the client. So first things first, let's talk about what the clients need. And when you're talking to the right person, you'll know you're talking to the right person if they confirm they have enough money to work with you, they confirm they have enough time to work with you, they confirm that they really want to work with you, and last but not least, that they have the power to actually make the purchase. So before you go down the path of all the strategy and asking all the questions and blowing their socks off by guiding them down this path, make absolutely certain they're the right person. You'd be surprised how often it's a junior marketing manager or you know, maybe the controller in the company, or an intern, or maybe it's one of the partners, but not the partner who's actually going to be making the final decision. Be very, very careful about going all in until you know you're absolutely talking to the right person. And if somebody tells you, oh, I'm just collecting information to get back to my boss, that's your opportunity to try and find a way past that person to go direct to the boss. Don't waste a lot of time on people just collecting information. So getting that money commitment early is really important so they respect your value and time. So here's another really, really critical and key important component is, like I was talking about earlier, about getting 50% up front. This is really important. And let's say this is a project that needs a lot of planning and strategy, and you have to ask a lot of questions, and you have to interview them, and then you have to put together a scope of work. Most people do all that work for free and send that proposal out just hoping that the client will appreciate that they did all that work for them. But the reality is clients don't really value that. What they will value is that you're the right person to lead them to success on their project, and that they are willing to pay for that even before you get to a proposal. So that's what we would call a scoping project. So if the client knows exactly what they want and they can give you a bullet list and it is everything in writing and it is very clear and there's no guesswork, okay, great. You could put a number on that and you're off to the races, and no big deal. They could pay 50% now and you can get started immediately, right? That's perfect. But most clients do not have this. And in fact, they need somebody to help build that for them. So you should actually be charging upfront for those scopes of work. So, hey, we're going to invest, between 5 and 10 hours of time. We're going to interview you. I might go to your offices. I might be Zoom meetings. I might interview more than one person in your company. And we're gonna dig deep on this so that we plan this out properly. At the end of this initial project, we're going to have a very clear scope of work that we all agree on. And then at the end of that, I'm going to give you a proposal for that scope of work. But notice that they've already paid you for doing that work, that 5 hours or 10 hours or 20 hours or whatever price you want to put on it to build the scope. So don't scope without getting paid is my word of warning about how to avoid giving away your business upfront. So this is really just text going into what I was talking about. But other people might call them discovery. You might call them audits. You might call them planning. Just make sure that you're quoting for that work and getting paid before you do a deep dive. And this one here is be wary of scams. Some of you have probably run into this before, and I know that I've definitely met a number of freelancers who've ran into this. But once you have a website up and you've got a contact form, these scammers are pretty sophisticated. And I mean, I've even had to do double looks. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've had some leads come in just in the last 6 months that I had to do some research on to confirm if it was a scam or not before I contacted them, because it's not always immediately obvious. But really the red flag that you're looking for is anybody that fills out your contact form that seems very eager to pay you in any way, shape, or form, or if they're very, very upfront about how much money they're willing to pay for the project. Those should be very clear red flags, and so be very, very careful. Do your research before you take on a project, especially from overly eager prospects. And let's talk about how most of us in this business, we create a rate for our client or our lead, whether it's an hourly rate or whether it's a flat rate price monthly for whatever services you're providing. I just want to be very clear that if you're not raising your prices every year, you are giving away your business. You're losing money, and you are harming your key earning potential years, and you're harming them dramatically. So it's really important that you create a culture of reviewing contracts on a regular basis and making incremental changes to your pricing on a regular basis. If you do this regularly from the beginning of all your client relationships, and even build it in your contract saying you're going to review on a regular basis, then all of your clients will come gladly along with you for the ride. And there will be little or no friction ever about you raising prices in a reasonable and incremental way. However, if you say you're going to, or even put it in your contract, but then you forget to, and you wait a couple of years, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much work I'm doing for this client, and I've been charging them the same thing for years. I need to fix this. And then you go try and shake the tree after they've had the same prices for 2 or 3 or however many years. That's a lot of friction suddenly. You're going to have a fight on your hands, and it's going to be awkward. So don't let that happen. Build it into your DNA and your culture to regularly revisit your pricing, and make sure that you're consistently and regularly increasing at the minimum to cover for inflation. But probably you want to be raising your rates by about 10% a year or more. But we're going to talk a little bit more about pricing in a minute as well. So set those expectations up front, remind them that they're coming, give them some notice, and then make sure you follow through. And then anytime you do raise prices, you need to give your reasons. Hey, because and inflation's not a good reason, but I'll give you good reasons why you want to raise your prices. Because now we've leveled up. We have more experience in the industry. We're providing a higher level of service. We're doing more for the amount of money that you're already paying us. And it's part of what we do because, I'm the best at this, or we're the best at this. And whatever the case may be, just make sure when you're raising those prices, you're giving some justification and reasoning that gives them a reason to say yes. So it doesn't need to be a crazy long story or anything, but if you give them a reason to say yes and you've managed expectations from the beginning, you should almost never get any pushback whatsoever on your pricing. What to watch out for on the pro bono side. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. I do a lot of work with nonprofits and smaller ones who don't have a lot of funding. A lot of times they just don't have the means. And so, your heart goes out and you want to help them. But this is your living. Unless you have it built into your model where you give away a certain percentage of your business. Like, for example, we give away about 10% of our business every year in pro bono for nonprofit work, but it's intentional. We've planned for it. It's built into our pricing model with all of our other clients. We have the room for it. But if you're struggling or you don't have a lot of space for it, you may not realize that you're giving away too much of your business to these pro bono asks. So be very careful, and also be very careful about friends and family. They always need help. These companies will always need help. And probably a lot of us have some familiarity with family members that are travel agents for guilt trips. We want to watch out for those. And ask yourself, are you in business or are you just doing favors? These are things you can ask yourself to make sure you're armored up against this type of stuff. So if you want to do pro bono work, my recommendation to you is you be the one to reach out to the organizations you want to help. If it's somebody you've never heard of, or somebody that heard of you from a friend of a friend and they're just kind of asking for help, that's not the right way to approach this. If I were you, I would find missions and nonprofits that you're passionate about what they do. And if you're going to do favors for people, choose them and reach out to them and give those organizations, the ones you're deeply passionate about, give them your pro bono and nonprofit volunteer type work. And be resolved. You can give it away for money. You can give it away for knowledge, or you can give it away for a relationship. Just make sure that, hello. We're coming back into it. Just make absolutely sure that number one and number two and number three, they're going to happen by themselves. So when you're doing your work, you're going to be gaining knowledge, you're going to be gaining money. Number two and number three automatically happen. So always aim for all three. Does that make sense? So if you're doing the work, you're going to gain knowledge, you're going to gain relationship. That's automatically going to happen. So you should also always be charging for the work that you're doing. Hopefully this gives you some additional armor as well. Be nice, profit more. And that kind of brings us to the finish line. Usually the meat and potatoes of this is really giving people opportunities to ask questions and dig in. A couple things that we didn't go into, other tactics on how to raise your prices. So we can dig in on that since we have a little bit of extra time. And then another thing that is kind of common questions. How to gain new clients is sometimes a difficult prospect. So we can also dig in on potentially marketing for yourself and ideas on how to get new clients. So with that being said, I think this would be a good time to open the floor to questions, and I'd love to help. As we open this up, I also want to just caveat this and say Highforge is a collective. We used to be a normal agency. We had about 20 salary employees working in downtown Orlando. And I found out that I'm really not a great babysitter. And I didn't really enjoy putting out fires all day, every day. Instead, what I found out that I enjoyed doing was I love working with other freelancers and I love working with other agencies who are self-policing, who are not afraid of hard work, who are self-motivated and don't need a boss to motivate them. And these are the people that I love to help. And in so doing, we also end up creating a lot of strategic partnerships because I don't hire employees anymore. I instead work with freelancers and other agencies. And with that being our business model, it's been actually a pretty wonderful experience. Working as a general contractor. So clients come to me with a problem, and the better I know you, your business, what you do, how you do it, what makes you unique, sometimes that gives me an opportunity to match you with potential clients for potential work. So if that's something that might interest you, and if you're really good at what you do, or you have a very specific niche that you are really focused in, that's the kind of stuff that gets me excited. And you should definitely reach out to me, whether it's a DM on Twitter. My email address is scott@highforge.com if you want to reach out that way. And I'd love to connect in more detail later as well. So that being said, yeah, who's got questions and what do you got for me?
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. This was amazing. This is useful knowledge for me as I try to build my business for sure. And I'm sure it will be for everybody else. Thank you for your time.